Any guy that can do a body slam, he's my candidate. He's my guy. I had heard that he body slammed a reporter. And he was way up. And I said, oh, this was like the day of the election or just before. And I said, oh, this is terrible. He's going to lose the election. Then I said, well, wait a minute. I know Montana pretty well. I think it might help him. And it did.
Congressman John Fortier did win that race. He was charged with body slamming that reporter as well. President Trump on the stump this Thursday in Montana. We're going to talk about the midterms now on our roundtable with senior congressional correspondent Mary Bruce, Kim Strassel, columnist for the Wall Street Journal, Juan Williams, political analyst for Fox News, author of the new book, What the Hell Do You Have to Lose? Trump's War on Civil Rights. Did I say that right?
You hit it just right.
Okay. Republican strategist Alex Castellanos and Democratic strategist Karen Finney, longtime advisor to Hillary Clinton. And Alex, let me begin with you. Listen, midterms, we all know they're always a referendum on the president, never more than this year.
Never more than this year. Trump is on every ballot, and we just saw his strength and his weakness there. The same week that a reporter is butchered overseas, he's talking about body slamming a reporter here. But what does that tell us? Trump is all about strength. In an uncertain world where everything's falling apart, where people don't know what to believe in, where everything is uncertain, you want someone to hold it together. And besides, you know, all the media, all the criticism of Trump and his craziness and all that, there's another America, as we learned in 2016, that thinks the world's falling apart and they want a president who projects strength.
And Karen Finney, one of the things we've seen from that projection of strength, as Alex talks about, is a consolidation of the Republican vote, which has really contributed to the rise in the president's approval ratings.
It has, although it's also October, and it's a time when you would expect to see some of this consolidation. And I would actually offer, not surprisingly, an opposing view.
Shocked.
I know, we're shocked. Which is that I think a lot of people are realizing that the Trump rhetoric is not actually doing for them what they thought it was going to do. They sort of thought perhaps maybe what he's saying is offensive, but I'm going to be okay. And I think what they're realizing, trickle-down economics doesn't work. I'm tired of Washington having to spend so much time defending this president, protecting this president. Where are the jobs?
You think the economy's doing better?
Not for people. I'll tell you.
How
I spend a lot of time.
Obama credit for it if
we have a
if Trump isn't holding it there.
Yeah, but look at the deficit. I think the issue is people are realizing this president is offensive. He's race baiting, and so that he's reminding people of some of the things they don't like about him, and that's a problem for
Mary,
most
you cover Capitol Hill every day. One thing Republican incumbents wish the president would talk about a little bit more is the economy, is their agenda.
Yeah, and the president this week made very clear his closing argument, right? He's going out there talking about immigration instead of necessarily hitting on the economy and some of the other issues that I think a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill want to be talking about. Because when the president does go out and hit so hard on immigration, it also exposes the flip side, which is that Congress hasn't been able to do anything on this issue. The president isn't making an argument about policy here. He's making an emotional argument, and that is a little tricky for some Republicans.
And Kim, one of the things we saw in that piece from Ted Cruz, from Paula Ferris on the Texas Senate race, is that even someone like Ted Cruz, it puts him in an uncomfortable position when the president's talking about immigration.
Yeah, look, I think if you were to talk to the White House, their argument would be, we were out there, we were talking about the economy, our candidates were talking about the economy, and we weren't getting a lot of traction. But I have put my name out. I'm going to make this a referendum on me. And the only way that we pull this out is to excite our base, get them ginned up, and have them turn out. Now, it does put some of those congressional members, especially in those suburban districts, in an awkward place because they have to talk to that base, but also backpedal from the president a little bit. But overall, the belief is that in addition to the Kavanaugh hearings, which gave a lot of fuel out there for Republicans, the president being out there and saying, latching onto this, they're about mobs, we're about jobs. This is what's changing the dynamic that Nate Silver was describing.
Yeah, and I was just saying, and Juan, as we just heard from Nate, that this could all come down to who does the president energize more in these final 2 weeks.
Correct. So, I mean, what you're seeing is I think they're playing to the pollsters here, George, and the pollsters are making it clear the tax cuts were not working as a message for the midterms. He's switched now, and he said, hey, immigration stirs this base. This talk of mobs, especially after Kavanaugh, stirs the Republican base. And so it becomes a base election in that sense. Get our people to the polls. What you've seen after Kavanaugh is a hike, or a spike, I should say, in the Republican level of enthusiasm for turning out, participating in the midterms. On the other hand, I think what you see is that the president is all too willing to go about body slamming the press or go after the notion that the immigrants are really criminals, they're all MS-13, or, as he said this week, likely Democratic voters.
It's pretty clear. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, but that kind of fear-mongering, I mean, part of the what that we're hearing in the polling is not getting to the why. And I do think, remember, it's energizing Republican men, college-educated Republican women and independents. We're seeing this in the Georgia race, are not with the Republican Party. Georgia governor's race. They are not with the Republican Party. And when he goes out there and talks about, you know, the fear-mongering and horse face, people are reminded they don't like that.
Look,
For some of these candidates who were Trumpian in their primaries, it is a problem for them in their general because people are now having to back away, and he puts them in a very tough position, as you've said.
Trump didn't just drop on planet Earth. He's been this guy. We know this guy. Democrats are already on fire. Democratic women are on fire. We've already seen this. Problem with fire is you can't set fire on fire. It can't grow. They can't get any more intense.
But our base is growing, but the number of people voting for Democrats is growing while the number of Republicans is holding still.
But you know, can we just step back for 1 second, though? We don't know what's going to happen yet in November.
Let's all stipulate that.
Yeah, okay, but what we do know over the past 3 weeks, you know, there was a very compelling analysis from Charlie Cook from Cook Political Ratings. He wrote just a couple days ago, he goes, one thing we do know is that one of the biggest mistakes Democrats have made in a very long time was how they handled Kavanaugh. You know, 3 weeks ago, the Democrats could have taken over the Senate.
But then the question,
they were going to have a blue wave. That is pretty much done.
I think that
is clear.
It was clear. It was clear 3 weeks out. The question is that going to be sustained or has it peaked?
I think that's right.
Yeah, and given the news cycle and the way that the conversation can change, who knows how long that will be sustained? And Republicans clearly are betting on the fact that they think they get a bounce from Kavanaugh. They're projecting that, but that also could work to their disadvantage. I mean, you could see a lot of, moderate Republicans being turned off by the way that Republicans handled this. So Democrats can also benefit from this entire conversation as well.
Just don't forget, Kavanaugh right now is not approved of by most Americans. His confirmation is opposed by most Americans. So when you talk about whether the Kavanaugh spike dissipates, it's a very real question. And that's why when Trump goes off message, when he makes it solely about Trump, when he starts talking about Stormy Daniels as horseface, when he goes off on body slamming the horse, I think there's a lot of sense of, yeah, you're playing to the base, but you're hurting us, and you're specifically hurting us in these suburban House races outside of major metropolitan areas with suburban, white, educated women.
One thing is pretty clear is that the Republicans are trying to make a lot of this election, at least in the House, about Nancy Pelosi. It's caused some uncomfortable situation for Democratic candidates who are about a third of the non-incumbents have refused to explicitly support her. I want to show a little bit of that.
Now, the president likes to call my mom a liar. What do the facts say?
The facts suggest that you absolutely have a Native American.
Would you vote for Nancy Pelosi for House Democratic leader?
No.
Probably not.
Honestly, no.
I would not support Nancy Pelosi as our next speaker.
I don't support Nancy Pelosi. I put out a commercial saying that I don't support Nancy Pelosi.
We actually got a little bonus. We're looking forward to talking about the DNA on that as well, the technical snafus. But Mary, this is creating an interesting dynamic there. Now, Democrats will say that this is overstating her lack of support. These are people who just aren't willing to come out and declare it. But if the Democrats do take control, but it's on the low end of that 23, it's not certain that she will be Speaker.
No, well, and it all comes down to what margin, right? How many members actually are members who came out and ran saying that they wouldn't support Nancy Pelosi. What's interesting now is that we're seeing her sort of lay some groundwork here. She, in an interview recently, said, look, do whatever you have to do to win. I don't care if you say you're not going to support me. Everything changes if they take back the majority.
You're so right about that, because remember, if you like your health care, you can thank Nancy Pelosi, by the way. And people remember that. She's a very effective leader on the Democratic side. And people know that.
I mean, that's right. She knows very well how much support she has and does not have.
Kimberly, Karen mentions health care. That has turned out to be the most effective issue for Democrats in this campaign.
Remarkable, too, because, by the way, who landed us with soaring health care prices? The Democrats, and yet now they've turned around and essentially saying, well, it's the Republicans' fault because they haven't fixed it. And I give them full credit for managing to do that. But one of the problems for Republicans are back where they were in 2006 when they lost the House the first time. And one of the reasons that happened is because they did not have an effective message on health care, and Democrats did, and Barack Obama did.
And it doesn't help when you have the Senate Majority Leader this week come out and say, oh, and if we retain control of the House and Senate, we will do severe damage to social entitlement programs, Social Security.
Well, actually, what he said was, he actually said they're not going to do it, but this is the real problem behind.
And he suggested somehow, and the suggestion was, oh, you know, the deficit's spiking, and those Democrats are talking about this. The real cause is not loss of revenue, but the expansion of social entitlement programs.
But also,
that's not true. That's not true. No, it's the revenue is down.
As much as we look at a survey, ooh, it's up at 14%. Number one issue, 14%. No one cares. This election is about much bigger things. A world falling apart. Is the president a threat to women? Is he going to take women back? This election is about turbulent change. We've been here before, by the way. We've seen this election in the 60s, the counterculture, which was about women's lib, black power, and the whole Earth catalog. And what did that produce? Richard Nixon and the silent majority. Today, we're back to the 60s.
But I think that's why you have a lot of people who say, in addition to healthcare, Alex, they want a check on Trump.
But also,
so I think
that's the big question.
And that's a lot of it.
Is a check on Trump bigger than women's empowering women? That's
Alex,
one of the tests we're going to see
for
this
some
election.
of us in this country, it wasn't just about the 60s. These struggles, I will say this is black women, have been ongoing.
By the way, the 60s won. I'm agreeing with you.
It's not about the 60s won. It's that America won. It's that we progressed. And people, look, you say that Trump is about strength. I say he is about buffoonery. My God. His answer, what he's done this weekend alone on the Khashoggi case, it sounds like what he said about Charlottesville, about people being on both sides of the issue. It's as much buffoonery.
I am trying to just take a good, strong look at it.
And Mary, one of the other things you saw on the Khashoggi case is even the president's strongest supporters in the House and the Senate backing away from him.
Yeah, once again, you have the situation where the president, his refusal to come out and strongly condemn a situation puts him at odds with his own party. I mean, you have the president coming out and saying he finds this latest explanation credible. Congress, members of his own party, do not. The president wants to maintain these arms sales. Congress, members of his own party want to use that as leverage. And it just creates this incredibly big divide. And even, I should say, one notable people who have not commented yet, leadership. You have not seen Mitch McConnell or Paul Ryan.
Wait a minute. George, so Donald Trump's problem now is that he's too measured? When did we enter this world? Look, there's a reason Saudi Arabia...
That's not measured. Yeah, hold on. He's not measured. He's trying to have it both ways in the same way he was trying to say Nazis are okay.
I think we ought to be very careful before we talk about having it both ways. First of all, I don't know anybody, including the president, who hasn't condemned this. But the big issue here is there's a reason Saudi Arabia is the largest purchaser of American arms is because they use them to project strength in a region that we don't want to do. They do work we don't want to do. So lives are at stake. If you're talking about reducing arms sales, you may also be saying we're going to put American men and women at risk in harm's way there.
The president has condemned the death.
You want him to be measured here.
The president has condemned the death of Khashoggi. He has not condemned the murder of Khashoggi. But the question
do we know what happened, though?
I think we have a pretty good
sense, Alex.
The question I have is that, this has dominated headlines for 3 weeks now, but does it matter to voters?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people just have a hard time focusing on foreign policy. I mean, foreign policy is always one of those issues that unless you're in the middle of an active hot war or something, it's not something that voters go to for the thing. So it's something to watch on TV, especially when people are mentioning bone saws, et cetera. Yeah. But it's not necessarily something that the average voter, it rises to the level that Alex has been talking about, these huge issues.
But what it is doing is taking up a lot of the conversation. When a lot of members of Congress, instead of having to come out and say where they stand in comparison to what the president thinks, they want to be talking about the midterms. They want to be talking about tax reform or the economy or immigration, and they're not being able to do that.
But I think a lot of it comes back to what you're talking about. When you start talking about the grisly dismemberment of a journalist or a dissident voice, people want to see that the American president is able to dominate on that world stage and command. Instead, what it looks like is he is deferring to the wealth of the Saudis, inviting questions about his tax returns. You heard it earlier on this show from Congressman Schiff. And it's this, again, distraction from the simple idea that if he was seen as in command and control versus the Saudi king, it would be helpful to the Republicans.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.